Snow was already covering her hair when she collapsed onto her knees, right there on the frozen porch, like the world had finally become too heavy for her body to carry. Her breath came in short, trembling clouds, her shoulders shook from more than the cold, and the backpack on her back looked like the last thing she owned in the entire world. Inside the warm yellow light of the cabin, a man stood frozen in place, staring at a stranger who looked as if she had fallen out of the storm itself. He didn't know her name, her story, or the truth that could change both their lives forever. All he knew was that someone was hurting, and that maybe, just maybe, one small act of kindness could matter. Before the story continues, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, comment what kindness means to you, and subscribe to the channel if you believe in second chances, unseen struggles, and the quiet power of compassion. The man's name was Daniel, and life had already stripped him down to the bare essentials long before that night arrived. He lived in a small wooden cabin at the edge of a snow-covered town where the roads were quiet and the nights were long. His wife had passed away years earlier after a sudden illness that left no time for goodbyes, no space for acceptance, and no mercy for the future they had planned together. Since then, Daniel had been raising their young daughter alone, balancing 2 jobs, exhaustion, grief, and responsibility like fragile glass plates that never stopped spinning. His hands were always rough, his eyes always tired, and yet his heart still refused to harden completely. He had learned to survive with very little, but he had never learned how to stop caring. That night, when he saw the woman kneeling in the snow, something old and human stirred inside him. Not curiosity, not fear, but recognition. The recognition of someone who had reached their limit. The kind of pain that doesn't scream loudly, but seeps into the bones and settles there, heavy and quiet. Her clothes were thin for the cold, her cheeks were pale, and her eyes were filled with something that looked like both shame and relief, as if asking for help was harder than enduring the suffering itself. Daniel didn't ask questions. He didn't hesitate. He simply opened his door wider and let the warmth spill into the night like an invitation. Inside, the cabin was small but alive with simple comfort. There was the smell of soup still lingering from dinner, the soft glow of a single lamp, and the quiet ticking of an old clock that had belonged to his parents. He gave her dry clothes, a blanket, and space. He didn't push for explanations, because he knew sometimes the soul needs rest before it can speak. His daughter slept in the next room, unaware that the world had just shifted slightly in ways she couldn't yet understand. The woman's name was Claire, though Daniel didn't learn that until much later. All he saw at first was a person who had been broken open by something invisible and overwhelming. She moved carefully, like someone afraid of taking up too much space, like someone who had recently lost everything that once defined her. And in a way, she had. What Daniel couldn't know was that Claire had once lived a life that looked like success from the outside. She was the CEO of a fast-growing company, someone whose name was printed on glossy magazines, whose calendar was filled with meetings, flights, and expectations that never ended. She had power, wealth, and influence, but she had also lost herself somewhere along the way. When her company became the target of a ruthless corporate takeover, when legal battles, betrayals, and public scrutiny swallowed her whole, she didn't just lose control of her business, she lost her sense of safety, her trust in people, and her belief that anyone could care about her without wanting something in return. So she ran, not with a plan, not with a destination, but with a desperate need to breathe somewhere no one knew her name. She left behind the sharp lights of the city for the quiet cruelty of the cold, believing solitude would be safer than connection. But solitude doesn't heal wounds, it only exposes them. Over the next few days, Claire stayed in the cabin. She helped where she could, washing dishes, sweeping the floor, and watching Daniel's daughter with a soft, careful tenderness that surprised even herself. She listened to Daniel talk about the small things, how the roof leaked a little when it rained, how the town library had closed, how his daughter liked pancakes shaped like stars. These details felt heavier than gold to her because they were real, grounded, human. They weren't about profit, margins, or public image or winning, they were about living. And Daniel in return began to notice how Claire flinched at sudden sounds, how she woke up from sleep like she had been running even in her dreams, how her hands sometimes trembled when she thought no one was watching. He didn't pry. He simply made more tea, added another log to the fire, and stayed nearby in the quiet ways that say, "You're safe here." Something gentle began to grow between them. Not romance, not dependence, but trust. The kind of trust that forms when two people are both standing at the edge of something painful and choose not to turn away from each other. Claire started to talk, slowly, in pieces, about pressure, about expectations, about losing control of her own life while the world applauded her from a distance, about how being admired is not the same as being known, about how success can be a lonely mountain where the air gets too thin to breathe. Daniel listened, not because he had answers, but because he had space. And sometimes, space is the greatest gift anyone can give. As winter softened into early spring, Claire changed. The tension in her shoulders eased. Her laughter came more easily. Her eyes lost some of their constant vigilance and gained something warmer instead. And Daniel, too, felt something shift inside him. A reminder that his life was not only defined by loss, not only by responsibility, but also by connection, that he was still capable of being seen and of seeing someone else fully. Eventually, the truth could no longer remain hidden. Claire's past caught up with her in the form of news alerts, legal updates, and messages that finally found their way through the quiet. The woman who had slept under his roof was not just someone who had lost her way. She was someone whose name carried weight, whose decisions affected thousands, whose return to the world would be noticed. When Daniel realized who she really was, it didn't change how he looked at her. It only made her pain clearer. He understood then that wealth does not protect the heart, that power does not shield the soul, and that loneliness does not care how big your house is or how high your title stands. Claire knew she couldn't stay forever. The world she left behind still existed, still demanded answers, still waited. But she would not return as the same person. She would return with something she hadn't had before. A memory of kindness that cost nothing, a reminder that people are not transactions, and a heart that had been gently put back together in a place that never asked her to be anything other than human. Before the ending, please take a moment to comment below with a single word that describes how this story made you feel. Your words matter more than you think. When Claire finally left, there were no dramatic goodbyes, no grand promises, only a quiet understanding that what they had shared would live on in both of them. Daniel went back to his simple routines, but something in him was lighter. He carried the knowledge that even in his smallest, hardest moments, he had been someone's refuge. And Claire went back into the world with a softer strength, one that didn't come from winning, but from healing. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories about kindness, resilience, and the quiet miracles that happen when people choose compassion over fear. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can ever be in someone else's life is not their savior, not their hero, not their solution, but their shelter. And sometimes that is more than enough.